Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm redrawing the most embarrassing piece of fan art I have on the internet. This was drawn 10 years ago, so I would have been 13 or 14 at the time. And yeah, it's pretty painful to look back on this one, so I hope I can make it a lot better in this redraw. So first, surface level, let's just talk about the things that jump out at me looking back at it now. One of the worst things about it, I think, is Dib, the character in the front, is basically completely emotionless. He's just sort of standing very neutrally. He's looking out at the camera very neutrally. They're looking straight at the camera, which is a habit I actually had into art school. It's a really bad habit. You probably shouldn't have your characters staring straight out at the screen unless it's like a character design or something. If you're trying to show any kind of narrative at all, they probably shouldn't be looking right at breaking the fourth wall or whatever. So I'm definitely going to move their eyes, and I'm going to change up Dib's pose and expression dramatically. I think that when I first drew this was supposed to be shipping art, but it's hard to even tell because everyone's emotions are so weird. I don't really know what Zim is supposed to be emoting either. He looks sort of vaguely mischievous, but that's about it. There's also a lot of simple craft problems, like for example, this was definitely drawn in a heavy pencil line rather than inked and scanned into the computer and then colored digitally. That's one of the worst ways that you can do your process, I feel like, especially when you don't know what you're doing, like I sure didn't. I was using a scanner out of like my parents' printer at the time, and I had the settings all wrong, so you can see that the lines are literally lighter than the colors that I'm filling them in with, which makes it look so bad. There's also just a lot of really unnecessary gradients, and coloring in the background just made it more clear that the background doesn't line up with itself. Like the chain link fence and the dirt ground, it doesn't line up at all on one side of the characters to the other. On top of that, the background isn't just poorly drawn, but it's also poorly designed. Like having the school right behind them sort of at the exact same angle with such a similar color scheme to the sky just really makes it look super boring and drab and weird. There's no like good sense of scale. It's not very exciting, so I decided to change up the background in this new version. I didn't want to put the school right behind them because pretty canonically it's just like a big rectangle, and I really didn't want to put that behind them, so instead I did sort of a floating island sort of background. I've been really into those lately. I kept the chain link fence because I felt like it wouldn't look like the same drawing without it, but I really mussed it up this time. Rather than trying to make it look really straight and failing, I thought that I would sort of lean into the grittiness of this show and this style and make it look really all like dented and messed up and weird. I also tried to put special attention into the line weight on this one because that's one of the #1 things that bothers me about this old piece is there's absolutely no line differentiation. Like, I guess because I was working with a pencil, there wasn't much I could do about it unless I went over the lines, which I definitely didn't do here, but I just wanted to see some more like thick and thin lines throughout so that the details are lighter and the outlines are more impactful, because the original drawing, it just looks like mush. Like everything is sort of treated with the same importance. There's no way to guide your eye. A great way to do this in digital is super easy, is just to make your brush slightly bigger when you're working on the foreground elements. That instantly helps the foreground stuff pop out from the background if the background inks are just lighter. You can also do this with color as well, by upping the saturation or the contrast of the foreground elements. That'll help them be pulled from the background. I sort of ended up accidentally doing that in this picture. I don't think I was doing it consciously, especially because the saturation level on the dirt and the sign is pretty high, but because of the design of the characters having such strong colors on them, it kind of made it look like I knew what I was doing with my colors in that regard, even though I definitely didn't. On the other hand, though, there were parts of their design that definitely made it harder for me, even today, and that is the layering of extremely dark colors and blacks. So Zim has black gloves, black pants, black shoes, and black hair, and Dib has black hair, black pants, black jacket, black belt. There's just a lot of really dark colors going around, so instead of just sort of awkwardly layering them on top of each other, as you can see in the original image, their hair sort of forms like one weird blob of darkness on the picture. I decided that Dib was going to have more pure black hair, whereas Zim was going to have a more off gray sort of black color, because while Zim is wearing a wig, and I could sort of justify to myself that maybe it would be a bit off color, a bit more of like a plasticky black rather than the color that someone might naturally have. So that's sort of how I decided that one. Anytime that you're having multiple really dark colors fighting against each other, just choose one to win the fight, basically. That's a great way to make sure that you're not getting these sort of big spaces where the eye just sort of gets trapped. If you really have to use black shapes right next to other black shapes, you can just put a white line in between them, like basically invert the outline to a white line. But I do find that in general that makes the composition of the drawing a little bit trickier, so I recommend trying this instead if you can. Honestly, I feel like fan art gets a bad rap a lot of the time. I think a lot of people see it as just a way to beg for likes, or other people will see it as something that's like sort of unprofessional, like using another person's IP is something you never want to put in a portfolio. I was planning on making a whole video about this subject, but I thought I'd just mention it quickly here. Like, there are many people who've gotten jobs, like dream art jobs, because they've drawn fan art for the thing that they end up getting hired on. The realistic Pokemon in Detective Pikachu, for example, someone did a bunch of fan art of realistic Pokemon and they ended up getting hired to work on Detective Pikachu. There's also a Sonic game that basically someone just made a bunch of Sonic fan creations and stuff, and it was so good that they ended up getting to do their own Sonic game, and it was really popular. And basically what I'm saying is, like, if you're really into something and it's inspiring you to create a lot, like, don't fight it. I don't know how many of you guys out there in the community feel this kind of pressure. I think it might be more of an art school thing. In fact, literally on my first tour of the school I end up going on, the like tour guide made a joke about how like putting you know, art of like superheroes or something would be like the dumbest thing you could possibly put in your portfolio. And she may have been right for the school, because I feel like academia has its own rules about stuff like that, but I think in the real world, like, doing fan art, if it's high quality, is never gonna hurt your chances, and in some rare cases it can even get the attention of exactly the people that you want to work for. So definitely don't look down on fan art, and don't let other people convince you to look down on it, because I feel like it's just a huge waste of time. You'll find out later that like fan art does not devalue your portfolio or your work at all. So I definitely learned a lot from doing fan art. Even though I don't do it as much anymore, I'm still very grateful to that period of my life. So how I used to color for the longest time was I just used the paint bucket tool pretty much for everything, and if it left little particles and stuff, I kind of just was like, well, that's just how it has to be. But lately what I've been doing is I've been making masks, and it's actually really easy if your inking was clean. Basically, you just select all of the outside of your ink, and then you invert the selection and put a light color in there, and then basically you have sort of a rough mask of all of the area that you're going to want to color, without skipping areas underneath the lines. If you're curious about how to do this, just look up clipping masks and the name of whatever software you're using, and there should be lots of tutorials on it. It really helped me because overusing the paint bucket tool definitely was a real issue. It caused all these little like grainy white lines, and I like the freedom to be able to like paint right into the shape, which you definitely can't do if you don't use masks. Sometimes I also do the shading first. In this case, I kind of felt like doing it because I thought that that like toned grayscale color that I picked sort of suited it, and I wanted to make sure that the light was working nicely, especially because the original drawing is so unbelievably flat. There's literally no shading. Like, what? Why did I put gradients on the floor and the school sign and in the background, but then did nothing on the characters? It makes no sense. So I wanted to make sure to put some nice shade on the boys in the new drawing. I also just generally was willing to let Zim look a little bit more different than his original design. That was something I used to really stress about when I would make fan art. I was like, man, if I pick anything that's like not canonical, then like I'm disrespecting the entire show or whatever it is. Whereas nowadays I'm like kind of whatever I think will look good I add to fan art. I figure that if you're gonna draw something by hand, you might as well make it look different than the original show. And so I gave Zim, instead of having no ears, which he doesn't have any in the show, I decided to give him some pointed ears. I just thought it looked cuter. It kind of makes him look a little bit like a goblin, but I don't really have a problem with that. I kept his ridiculous shaggy emo haircut that I definitely only gave him because I couldn't draw his hair the way it's drawn in the show. Basically anything where there wasn't bangs all around the face I was completely incapable of rendering. And honestly, in cartoon styles with big eyes, it is actually hard to do that without making the forehead look really strange because the eye takes up so much space. But I can at least do that now. So I guess I have improved at least a little bit over these 10 years. So now that I'm wrapping this up, I'm just going to compare them side to side. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me redo some of my most embarrassing fan art from my past. Like I always say, never throw away your old art. It's always something you can learn from. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much to my patrons, including Bella Story, Calpompone, Clockwork Construct, Dope Elephant Art, Dr. Casket, Elizabeth Album, Imagine Creations, Ivan Rodriguez, JJ Jade, Joseph Copel, Justin, Carla Tapia, Katie Marigold, Kira Dirt, Liv 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 Liv, Megan Claire, Micah Dactyl, Mr. Dr. Pants, Nora Cornelson, Nyara Tothep, Okamore, Ollie, Post-it Pixie, Rosie Warlock, Sergeant Pendulum, Spoy, The Artsy Moose, Your Boy ST, and Zoe Stardust.